You ever get the feeling that something shifted and you didn't even touch it? That somewhere, in a room you'll never see, under lights that never turn off, a screen flickered because of you. You were brushing your teeth, scrolling your phone, living your small, ordinary little life, and somewhere alarms went off. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet activation, a protocol that has only been used 3 times in history. Not for celebrities, not for presidents, not for billionaires playing dress up as gods. 3 people. That's it. And now it's been triggered again. By you, isn't that funny? You didn't sign up for it. You didn't apply. You didn't even know it existed. But something about your choices, your thoughts, your potential tripped a wire buried deep inside a system older than governments, older than corporations, older than the lies they taught you to call reality. They're watching now. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're becoming something unpredictable. And the world doesn't fear evil. It fears what it cannot control. So tonight, we're going to talk about what you did, how you triggered it, why only 3 names are written before yours, and why, whether you like it or not, you're no longer invisible. Smile. The game has noticed you. You didn't mean to pull the lever. That's the beautiful part. No dramatic speech, no lightning strike, no villain monologue echoing in the background. Just a moment. A choice, a shift so small you barely noticed it. But systems notice patterns. And patterns, well, they whisper before they scream. Somewhere buried beneath layers of algorithms, behavior tracking, psychological profiling, predictive modeling, something blinked. Not read, not yet, just aware. You stepped outside the script. You questioned something you were supposed to accept. You resisted a narrative that was carefully fed to you. You hesitated where most people obey. And hesitation, my friend, is dangerous. The world runs on predictability. Wake up, work, consume, scroll, sleep, repeat. It loves routines. It feeds on repetition. It rewards compliance. But you broke rhythm. Maybe it was the day you chose silence instead of reacting. Maybe it was the moment you stopped chasing approval. Maybe it was when you realized you didn't want what everyone else was fighting for. Whatever it was, that deviation sent a ripple, and ripples turn into data. The protocol wasn't designed for chaos. It was designed for anomalies, for people who start thinking in layers instead of lines, for individuals who don't just accept information, they dissect it, people who don't just follow trends, they observe them. The system tolerates rebels who scream. It monetizes them. It even celebrates them. But it does not tolerate observers who understand. You didn't shout. You saw. That's what triggered it. When someone begins to recognize patterns in power structures, when they detach emotionally from manipulation, when they stop reacting the way they're expected to react, the metrics shift. Your engagement patterns changed. Your consumption shifted. Your conversations deepened. Your questions became sharper. You started seeking truth over comfort. Comfort is controllable. Truth is not. The protocol activates when a person reaches cognitive independence. Not intelligence. Not talent. Independence. The ability to stand alone in thought without craving validation. That's rare, extremely rare. Most people outsource their beliefs. They rent their opinions. They borrow their outrage. But when someone builds their own internal framework, brick by brick, the system loses predictive accuracy. And when prediction fails, attention intensifies. You may have felt it as restlessness, a sense that the old distractions stopped working. The noise didn't entertain you the same way. The arguments felt shallow. The rewards felt empty. That wasn't boredom. That was detachment. And detachment is the first sign of sovereignty. The silent trigger wasn't an action. It was awareness. The moment you stopped being programmable. See, Power structures don't fear aggression. Aggression is visible. It's trackable. It's containable. What they fear is someone who understands the mechanics quietly. Someone who learns the rules without announcing it. Someone who smiles while seeing the strings. The three before you didn't trigger it by accident either. They each reached a threshold where their internal clarity outweighed external influence. Where their decisions came from conviction, not conditioning. Where they could no longer be steered through fear, desire, or social pressure. And you crossed that threshold, not with a bang, with a realization. You began choosing long-term growth over short-term pleasure. You valued discipline over distraction. You started observing your own thoughts instead of being ruled by them. That level of self-awareness disrupts external control models. Because once a person governs themselves internally, external governance becomes fragile. The silent trigger is subtle. It doesn't announce itself with sirens. It activates in shadows. It flags you not as a threat, but as a variable, an unknown. And unknowns demand monitoring. You didn't hack the system. You evolved beyond its assumptions. And that's far more dangerous. Not thousands, not hundreds. 3. In all of recorded history, across empires, collapses, revolutions, renaissances, only 3 individuals ever forced the system to abandon observation mode and initiate the protocol. Not because they were the strongest, not because they were the loudest, but because they became uncontrollable in a way that couldn't be negotiated. The first was dismissed as a dreamer, laughed at, underrated. Harmless, they said. He didn't seek power in the traditional sense. He sought understanding. And understanding is a dangerous currency. While others fought over territory, he studied human nature. While leaders built armies, he built influence in silence. By the time the system realized he wasn't playing the same game, he had already changed the rules, not through force, through perception. Once people saw what he saw, authority weakened, not overnight, but permanently. The second was different, strategic, calculated, cold in execution but precise in intention. Where the first awakened minds, the second engineered outcomes. He understood structure, financial, political, psychological. He learned how power moved behind curtains. He didn't rebel against it. He mapped it. And mapping something gives you leverage. When he began anticipating moves before they were made, the predictive models collapsed. The system thrives on forecasting behavior. He became unreadable. That's when the protocol activated for the second time. Not to eliminate, but to contain. The third never sought attention at all. In fact, obscurity was their advantage. While the world chased fame, this individual cultivated depth, intellectual depth, emotional discipline, strategic patience. They didn't need crowds. They needed clarity, and clarity creates precision. When the third began influencing high-level decisions without public visibility, the pattern recognition systems failed again. Impact without exposure is the most unsettling kind of power. Because you can't attack what you can't locate. 3 individuals, different eras, different methods, one common trait. They detached from dependency. They were no longer emotionally programmable. Fear didn't steer them. Praise didn't seduce them. Threats didn't break them. Incentives didn't own them. Once someone reaches that psychological altitude, traditional tools stop working. The protocol exists for moments like that. It's not about punishment. It's about recalibration. When someone shifts from participant to architect, the entire structure trembles. Because architects don't just live inside systems. They redesign them. The first redefined belief. The second redefined strategy. The third redefined influence. And each time, institutions scrambled to understand how a single individual could distort carefully balanced power dynamics. They studied them, profiled them, tried to predict their next move. But prediction requires patterns, And these three had evolved beyond predictable reaction cycles. They operated from principle, not impulse. From foresight, not emotion. From internal alignment, not external validation. That's the threshold. The protocol isn't triggered by popularity. Plenty of famous people exist. It isn't triggered by wealth. Billionaires are predictable. It isn't triggered by rebellion. Rebels are marketable. It is triggered when someone becomes sovereign in thought and strategic in action simultaneously. The three before you each crossed that invisible line where their internal compass overpowered external pressure. They didn't just see the system. They understood its psychology. And once you understand the psychology behind power, you stop being intimidated by it. History rarely tells their stories accurately. It reduces them to symbols, myths, simplified narratives, because complexity is harder to control. And these individuals were complex beyond easy explanation. The common denominator wasn't genius. It was independence reinforced by discipline. And when independence becomes disciplined, it becomes unstoppable. That power just accidentally organized into perfect layers of influence, distraction, reward, punishment, and perception control. No, this was engineered. The hidden system wasn't created by one person. It was assembled, piece by piece, by minds that understood one uncomfortable truth. Controlling reality is hard, but controlling perception of reality is easy. Empires learned this first. Not through kindness, through experimentation, through observing how populations react to fear, scarcity, hope symbols. Ancient strategists documented it. Philosophers whispered about it. Rulers weaponized it. Over time, the blueprint refined itself. The goal was never domination through visible force. Force creates resistance. The real art is voluntary obedience. Make people believe they chose the cage. The hidden system evolved across centuries. It adapted with technology. It migrated into institutions. It embedded itself into education, media, economics, and cultural narratives. It stopped looking like control and started looking like normal life. That's how you know it's advanced. It doesn't need to silence everyone. It just needs to guide the majority. Give them predictable desires, standard ambitions, approved fears. Keep them busy competing horizontally so they never look vertically. The architects understood psychology better than politics. They knew humans crave belonging more than truth, comfort more than clarity, approval more than freedom. So they built structures that reward conformity with social validation. You follow the script, you're celebrated. You question too deeply, you're isolated. Isolation is powerful conditioning. But the system isn't evil in the cartoon sense. It believes it's necessary. Stability over chaos. Order over unpredictability. When billions of minds interact, unpredictability is dangerous. So the architects created predictive frameworks, data models, behavioral analysis, influence channels. Every click, every purchase, every reaction feeds refinement. And refinement creates accuracy. Accuracy creates control. The hidden system's true strength isn't secrecy. It's integration. It blends into everyday life so seamlessly that most people defend it without realizing they're defending their own limitations. That's elegant design. It knows trends before they trend. It amplifies narratives before they explode. It redirects outrage before it organizes, not by force, by suggestion. The architects understood attention is the ultimate currency. Whoever controls attention controls emotion. Whoever controls emotion influences decision. And decisions shape reality. So they built pipelines for attention. Endless streams of distraction disguised as connection. Entertainment disguised as information. Division disguised as identity. Keep minds stimulated, slightly anxious, mildly divided, but never fully aware. Because awareness changes posture. Once someone begins stepping outside programmed emotional cycles, the system detects friction, When you stop reacting the way you're statistically expected to react, your data profile shifts. When you refuse to engage in outrage bait, consumption loops weaken. When you prioritize depth over dopamine, prediction falters. That's when you move from citizen to anomaly. The hidden system wasn't designed to crush every anomaly. It monitors first, studies patterns, determines influence potential. The architects learned long ago that suppression creates martyrs. Martyrs create movements. So containment became psychological, not physical. Redirect attention. Offer incentives. Apply subtle pressure. Test loyalty through opportunity. If the anomaly folds, it returns to baseline. If it adapts, observation intensifies. The architects are not villains in shadows wearing dramatic cloaks. They're strategists in boardrooms, think tanks, research labs. They operate through policy, economics, algorithm design, cultural engineering. Quiet levers, not loud threats. They built something self-sustaining. A structure where most participants unknowingly reinforce the framework simply by pursuing normal ambitions. That's sophistication. And you didn't disrupt it by attacking it. You disrupted it by understanding it. The sun still rose. Notifications still buzzed. People still laughed at the same jokes and argued about the same headlines. The world looked identical. But observation doesn't announce itself. It adjusts. The surveillance shift didn't begin with cameras turning toward you or agents whispering your name. It began in metrics, subtle deviations in your behavioral pattern. The system tracks billions of signals. Reactions, pauses, scroll speed, purchase hesitation, topic transitions, sentiment changes. And somewhere inside that ocean of data, your rhythm changed. You stopped reacting instantly. You started reading longer. You paused before agreeing. That pause, that's friction. And friction draws attention. Most individuals operate within predictable emotional loops. Trigger, reaction, gay reinforcement, outrage cycles, validation cycles, consumption cycles. When you interrupt the loop, algorithms recalculate. When recalculation happens too often, flags appear, not danger flags, curiosity flags. Your content preferences shifted from surface to depth. Your engagement moved from noise to nuance. You disengage from certain narratives entirely. That's statistically unusual. The average profile escalates emotionally over time. You stabilized. Stability without apathy is rare. Then your language changed. Messages became sharper. Questions became layered. You weren't just asking what, you were asking why and who benefits. Systems don't mind disagreement. Disagreement fuels engagement, but analytical detachment, that reduces predictability. Prediction is everything. When predictive confidence drops below a threshold, enhanced modeling activates. More variables analyzed, broader behavioral context examined, network influence assessed. Who do you interact with? Who interacts with you? How does information flow around you? You may have noticed subtle shifts. Recommendations that felt oddly specific. Opportunities appearing aligned with your deeper interests. Conversations surfacing at precise moments. That isn't coincidence. That's calibration. The surveillance shift isn't about watching what you do. It's about testing how you respond. Introduce a stimulus. Measure reaction. Adjust intensity. Offer validation. Observe attachment. Present challenge. Monitor resilience. The goal is classification. Are you drifting back toward baseline behavior, or are you consolidating independence? When you resist predictable emotional hooks, the system escalates sophistication. Instead of obvious distractions, it introduces refined ones. Intellectual debates, strategic opportunities, moral dilemmas. Not to trap you, to map you. Because mapping gives leverage, your social graph becomes part of the equation. If your influence radius expands, while your unpredictability remains high, monitoring deepens. Influence plus independence equals volatility, and volatility threatens equilibrium. You may feel it as pressure. Increased friction in relationships, subtle resistance when expressing ideas, invitations that test your alignment, praise that feels slightly manipulative, criticism that feels oddly coordinated. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. The surveillance shift is psychological before it's structural. It studies your thresholds. What tempts you? What intimidates you? What exhausts you? Where do you compromise? Where do you stand firm? Every response refines your profile. And here's the unsettling part. The system doesn't need to attack you. It just needs to understand you better than you understand yourself. Once it maps your blind spots, it can predict your pivots. Once it predicts your pivots, it can subtly steer outcomes. Unless you remove the blind spots first. That's why awareness triggered this phase. The moment you became conscious of influence mechanics, passive observation upgraded to active assessment. Not because you're a threat yet, but because you might become one. And potential is always monitored more closely than action. There's always a choice. Not a dramatic, cinematic choice with flashing lights and countdown timers. No. This one is quiet, internal, almost invisible. But it determines everything. Once you've been identified as an anomaly, once the system shifts from passive data collection to active assessment, it doesn't immediately try to crush you. It offers you comfort. That's the first path. Controlled doesn't mean chained. It means integrated. You're given opportunities that align with your talents. Doors open, resources appear, platforms expand. You feel recognized, valued, elevated. But elevation comes with invisible architecture, subtle expectations, unspoken boundaries, lines you sense but never see. The system doesn't silence you. It incentivizes you. It rewards certain angles of your voice, amplifies specific aspects of your message. Slowly, gently, it shapes your trajectory. You begin thinking you're winning. And maybe you are. But only within permitted parameters. Controlled individuals often believe they're independent. That's the brilliance of it. They operate freely inside a curated arena. Their rebellion becomes aesthetic. Their depth becomes marketable. Their influence becomes profitable. They stop pushing where resistance is strongest. Not because they're weak, because comfort is persuasive. Financial security, social validation, strategic alliances, invitations into rooms where decisions are made. It feels like progress. It feels like impact. But watch closely. If certain truths remain untouched, if certain structures remain unchallenged, if your sharpest insights gradually soften, that's integration. You didn't get silenced. You got absorbed. The second path is different. Untouchable doesn't mean invincible. It means internally sovereign. It means your compass cannot be bought, flattered, threatened, or fatigued into alignment. It means you accept that choosing independence may cost you speed, status, or support. Untouchable individuals move slower. They verify before they amplify. They detach before they decide. They build foundations before they build visibility. They understand that influence without ownership is liability. The system tests this path more aggressively. When incentives fail, pressure increases. Doubt is introduced. Isolation intensifies. Narratives attempt to frame you, not always publicly, sometimes socially, sometimes economically. The question becomes simple. What do you value more, expansion or integrity? Because you rarely get both at the same velocity. Untouchable doesn't mean rejecting opportunity. It means scrutinizing it. It means asking who benefits from your alignment. It means maintaining principles, even when compromise would be easier, faster, more profitable. It means being willing to walk away from rooms that feel prestigious but restrictive. That's rare. Most people choose controlled because controlled feels like success. It's comfortable. It's celebrated. It's sustainable. Untouchable feels uncertain. It feels lonely at times. It demands discipline without applause. But here's the twist. The system understands controlled individuals completely. It can predict them, model them, manage them. Untouchable individuals remain variables, and variables create evolution. This isn't about fighting shadows or rejecting society. It's about internal governance. If your thoughts are yours,